So you ever get a crazy request and you're not sure what to do with it? Well, join us today as we tackle this Peekaboo Woodgrain tumbler. Hi everyone, welcome to JC Creative. I'm Jessica, and if this is your first time here, I would like to welcome you. If you love DIY projects, anything from tumblers to teas, we have a little bit of everything for everyone. And I would encourage you to subscribe to my channel below and be sure to ring the little bell to be notified of new tutorials we post each and every Monday. So in this week's episode of Make It Monday, we are going to tackle a multi-layered tumbler. So this is what they would call a peekaboo. So we will have a graphic that comes through from a bottom layer onto a top layer. We are going to add a wood grain to that, and then we're going to add some water slides on top of that. So we're going to work on a couple of techniques, doing lots of different things. This was a custom order, so we've got a lot to work on. So let's get started. Okay guys, so we are going to work on a peekaboo tumbler, and this one's a weird request, but it uses the techniques that you need to use to make a really cool peekaboo. So I figured we could do this one together. So this guy wants, this is a type of bee house. So this is kind of going to be like my bumblebee tumbler where, you know, I knock out the little hexagons, and normally it would have gold glitter and be yellow bumblebee on the top or whatever. I'm sure you've seen it, but this one's going to be a little different. It's going to have these that peek through the hexagons, and then the top layer is going to have wood grain, and then we're going to add some different varieties of bees with water slides all over the top layer of this. So the first layer I started with is white paint. I'm going to put on these water slides. We are going to epoxy that. Then we are going to put on vinyl to block out the spots we want of these to show through. Then we're going to paint that white. Then we're going to wood grain it. Then we're going to peel the vinyl back. So we'll have our wood grain and our peekaboo. Then we're going to add our bees and epoxy all of that. So it's lots of steps, and this is the first one. So I've got my little bee water slides here. Apparently this is what these are called, mason bee houses. I don't know, they're a little different. This fella loves bees, and so one of his friends wants to make him a custom cup all about bees, and I printed 5 of these. Now I was out of gloss clear coat, so I used, all I had here was matte. So I don't typically use matte on my water slide, so let's hope they all go on. So you have your water slides, and I have a damp baby wipe that I'll use to put those on here, and you need your white cup. And this could be anything, you know, any kind of image. When you're doing a peekaboo, you don't have to cover the whole thing in image, or even glitter for that matter. You just need to cover up the spaces you're going to make pop through. So I'm kind of just going to put a couple squares around this thing, let it dry, epoxy it, and then we'll get to build the layers layer by layer. So I did dampen this a little bit, and I'm just going to slide my little graphics off of my thing. I know they're weird, but I think when it's all said and done, it's actually going to be a pretty cool cup. Oh, there he went. I'm just going to kind of spread them out, and I'm trying to, in my head, think, okay, I'll have a couple of those hexagons up here showing that pattern. Then I'll come down here. We'll have a couple, you know, down in this area showing the pattern. So I'm just trying to guess where I'm going to want these things to be. There we go. So let's say you wanted, you know, some little spots of hearts showing through or stars showing through or whatever. You could print little water slides like this for your base layer and just kind of patchwork them in, because no one's ever going to see all this empty space because eventually it's going to be covered up. So no use trying to cover the entire cup. I feel like I just bumped this one. I did. All right, well, fine. I'll let it turn and then I'll stop it. So I've got one here, I've got one here, so I guess maybe here and here. Just give me options. And I may not end up using them all, I don't know. But I just want them on there just in case. Oh, I know what I should do. I should probably put one down here on the bottom. So I can have a couple hexagons showing through the bottom edge. That'll work. Okay, so I'm just gonna take my damp cloth, make sure I got all the water squeezed out. I'm just wiping off the excess. It'll dry a little quicker. And that's it. So I'm gonna let these dry and then we'll come back, we'll throw some epoxy on it, and then we'll move on to our next steps of painting and wood graining and all that stuff. Let's stop here, buddy. I see a bubble. All right, maybe one last go around, make sure I got it all. I don't like to mess with them too much because I don't want to rub them to the point where they crack, which that does happen. The more you play with water slides, the higher your chances are you're going to screw them up. So do try to lay them and leave them. But always use something damp when you're messing with them, either your damp hands or damp. I think baby wipes work out perfect for me, so. Okay, so let this dry, come back, and we'll get some epoxy on it. So see you in a bit. Okay guys, so I already mixed my epoxy. I have 13 cups I'm covering here. So I mixed my epoxy already, which I do in big batches, but I use Pro-Marine epoxy. I use, you know, equal parts A and B. I warm up A, I mix in B, I stir till clear. And I have a bunch of tutorials out there where I do, you know, show you me mixing the epoxy, but in this situation, we really don't need it. Now, I am not going to put a thick coat over this. All I want to do is seal in the graphics to protect them so I can lay vinyl knockouts on top of them. So we don't need a lot of epoxy. We just need enough to cover them and seal them in. So we're just sealing this first coat here. There's no glitter on it, so it's going to be really smooth because the water slides are, you know, completely flat on the surface. Just sit down there. So all you want to do is make sure you've got the entire thing covered in a thin layer of epoxy. Just sealing our water slides in. So the next layer we can put our vinyl and our paint on. And these guys aren't going nowhere. What's that? Stinking hair. And that's it. I barely used any epoxy at all. Similar to what I would use if I'm ready to glitter a cup. What is going on here? The same one. I just put a super thin layer. I still probably will hit it with a torch just to make sure there aren't any, air bubbles will cause problems later. So, might still hit it with a torch, pop any bubbles that are here. But other than that, that's it. So, when I work on cups like this, I'll make sure I'm doing multiple cups at a time because I don't want to mix a batch of epoxy just for this. So right now I have 13 other cups on the turners, plus a couple getting, with thin coats like this, getting ready to get glitter. So, I'm going to move on and do the rest of my cups, and we'll be back when this is dry. All right, so I have spray painted my cup in a gloss white spray paint, and I have put it on a post just for easy handling because when I'm doing our wood grain, I like to need something to hold on to. So for wood grain, I have several videos on here that show different methods for wood grain. But I want to make a lighter wood grain. So to do that, these are the inks that I use. And I use these 3 inks to make 125 wood grains for a brewery here recently. So these are my go-tos. On my supply list, there are links to these, where I get these. I'm really probably going to use more of this lighter brown, which I'm almost out of, and this yellow today. And then I have some 91% alcohol. This is one of my favorite brushes to use. It has a round tip at the top. And then I do have some of these what they call wood grain brushes. So these are actually chiseled to give you a nice wood grain effect. I don't always use these, but I'm going to show you how they work. So I'm going to start by, I have this messy little paint tray I reuse all the time. I'm going to put a little bit, now this is almost done, I'm going to have to pour it. I'm going to put a little bit of my brown there. Just a dip of yellow here. Won't use a lot of it. And a little of my darker brown over here. Okay, so we're leaving our decals on there because we don't want that section to be wood grained. So the first thing I do is I get, oh, I forgot my towel. I need a little towel. Okay. So I'm just going to get my brush damp, and then I'm going to brush my, and there was already some brown in my brush because this is my brush I use. So I'm going to come into here, I'm going to get some of my brown, some of my yellow, my other brown. Now if I have, like, I want this to be light, so I'm not going to go all out to make it real dark. If you have this brush, and let's say we put a little bit more of this color on this one, this makes almost perfect wood grain strokes for you. But you have to have a base of the brown first, at least a little bit of color, or you'll get a lot of white. And I don't want a lot of white in my background there, so so what I'll do is I'll sometimes put this on first, then I'll come back in with my grain brush and let it just give me some green. And the reason I want this to be a lighter color wood grain is because I am putting some water slides on top of this. Once we peel those little honeycomb shapes, I'm going to add some water slides of all these different Ohio-based bees. And the reason I use 3 colors is because real wood, it's not monotone. It has lots of different colors. So like I will blend in the yellows with the browns. Because then it starts to look like real wood, because real wood does have lots of different blends. But see that brush? That's just really cool. It's super easy. This does a lot of the work for you. And again, on my supply list, I have links to these brushes, to these inks I like. These are actually India inks. They are not alcohol inks, but they work pretty much the same way as the alcohol inks do. Little goes a long way. I mean, okay, so I bought this bottle at the beginning of my 125 cup project, and I still have just a little bit in there. So this one bottle wood grained 125 cups. So pretty good. I love the lighter wood grains. And then my bottom, I normally just try to make look like a knot. Actually, I want a little bit of that darker brown in this. I think my little thingy's not working very well. Oops, I just spin it around the bottom, and I do make sure if anything did come over the edges to just blend it in a little bit. Here's a white spot where there's no color at all, so I'm just going to blend that in. Just gently pull these out. And there we go. There's my light wood grain, which is perfectly the right color to put my bees on. Should work out pretty well. So I'm going to set this aside here. See if it'll stand up there. All right, and then I'm going to pause for a minute. I'm going to get my bees, going to get the water. By the time I find all that, this should be dry enough. Actually, I lied. I am going to clear coat this first because I don't want the water slide to mess up the wood grain. I don't always clear coat, but since I'm going to put water slides on top of it, I think it's a good idea to go ahead and give this a nice once over clear just to seal that wood grain in. These inks will not turn colors. Some of the alcohol inks that folks use to make wood grain, they will turn green when they're hit with clear coat. There's certain colors that do it, but these really don't change color much. So I am gonna clear coat this. I'm gonna clear coat this real quick, let it dry, then we'll come back, peel these little wood things, and then put on our bees. So we'll be back in a few. All right, guys, so we are back. My cup is nice and dry. I seal coated our our alcohol ink or India ink wood grain on there, and I've got all my little bees here that I'm going to be putting on this cup. So I already trimmed them out, and so the first thing I'm going to do, though, I'm going to peel our Peekaboo. And what I normally do is I make a kind of cut in the middle of it to get my knife under it, because I don't want to screw up around the edges. So if I start in the middle and grab it, and any scratches or scrapes or whatever, it really shouldn't matter, because the epoxy is going to shine it back up. Sorry. It's like walking and chewing gum here. So I'm gonna peel all these little guys off of here. I always try to peel inwards as well, because I don't want to mess up what's outside of whatever we've got on here we're peekabooing. So there's my little like mason bee house that's popping through. And this, just so you know, this is the mason bee. This is his favorite bee. So then what we're going to do is I'm going to put these little bees all around these little habitats here. The mason bee is his favorite. So that's why I put the little mason bee houses on this one. And I know that there are people who say you have to use like the removable vinyl or the less tacky vinyl. I use my normal sign vinyl for my peekaboos. I do not use anything less sticky. Typically it's not on there incredibly long, overnight at the most of the time. I mean, I have no problems getting it back off, especially if I have a layer of epoxy underneath it. So I know that some people, I don't feel the need to buy another type of vinyl. I don't use removable vinyl really for anything, so I don't buy it. I do just use my scraps that I have laying around to make peekaboos most of the time. I don't really throw away any vinyl, even a small piece. I keep. I'm recording, buddy. Sorry, guys. Even a small piece I will keep to put a name on it or whatever. I don't like to waste vinyl. So I just have a bin that is sorted out by colors. And when I need a certain color, I just go to that bin, grab a scrap. It's really quick to cut out a name or a number or whatever. So I do save any viable piece of vinyl that I have, and it works wonders. It's perfect for these kind of things. Okay, so everyone's peeled around the sides, and I'm gonna peel our little fellas on the bottom here, and then we're gonna stick on some bees, and we're gonna let it dry, and then we are going to epoxy it, and then we will be all done with this Peekaboo wood grain tumbler. And this would be the same method you would use if you're doing, let's say, a two-tone wood grain. You know, you could put the darker on the bottom, add on your, epoxy, add on your Peekaboo vinyl, then paint, put your lighter color of wood grain or darker, whatever you do, and then same thing. So that's all of them. Okay, so there's all those little guys. And now I'm just going to put on some bees. I'm going to start on this side. I'm going to drop in a few at a time. I debated whether leaving their names on them or not, but the lady liked the little print I found with the bees and their names. So a couple of them I did get a little happy, and I actually cut the names off. So I have to stick on the little names with the little bee. So I'm just gonna put like 3 in here at a time because they'll go on pretty quick. And then I have my baby wipe, which is what I use to do to smooth out my water slides. So let's get these guys ready here. This is like tepid water. This guy's already ready to go on. So he is the mason bee. So I think I'm gonna put him here next to this mason hideout here. Let's fit him in that little nook. And I just pat it out, and then I use my damp cloth to smooth it on there. And see, this is why I wanted the wood grain to be light, because I knew I was using these images of the bees, and I wanted them to pop, but I didn't want a white cup. So now you have to be careful as you're working around that you don't rub off any of the other ones you've already done. So this guy, I actually would like him to face the other direction, so I'm gonna put him on backwards. Different than I had him anyways. I have quite a few bees to work into this design here. And since his name is off, I can put it above him. It doesn't have to be below him like all the other ones are going to be. Well, a couple. So I'll just put that there. Okay. And then we put this guy over here somewhere. He's upside down too, but you can still see what I'm doing. So I just normally pat it. I hold it with one finger. Oh, he's on a runaway here. And just smooth it out with my damp cloth. So I got him there, him there, him there. Such a strange request cup. However, I think it's going to turn out really good. And these are my favorite kind of cups, are the ones that are weird and unique. So I'm gonna drop a few more in the water here. Get them going. So I'm just gonna keep going along. I'm gonna finish putting all my bees on, and then I will come back when we are ready to put on the epoxy. So see you in a minute. All right, guys, so here it is with our bees all on here and dry. So I am going to just wipe it down a little bit with some alcohol. Make sure that I don't have any fuzzies or fingerprints or anything. So I realized I've been getting a lot of like weird little fibers and stuff on my cups, and I couldn't figure out what it was until today. It is my baby wipes. So my baby wipes that I use a lot, which, well, this was a different brand, apparently they are leaving almost like a residue when I use them. So I use reusable cups and stuff to mix my epoxy, and I would use those to wipe them out. So I think those fibers were getting into my reusable cup and then transferring to my tumbler. So I've got a cup already mixed here with my 50-50 epoxy. This tutorial is already kind of long with all the steps, so I'm not showing you how to mix epoxy. I use a 1-to-1 ratio epoxy. I warm up part A, I stir in part B till clear. I use a metal stirrer to prevent bubbles, and then I'm ready to go. So there are other tutorials. If you want to zip back a few on my page, channel, whatever, you'll see me actually walk through the steps of doing epoxy, but it's pretty simple. So when I coat my epoxy, and this is how I get a really good glossy finish, there's a little no bubbles, I do it in 2 steps. I put on a very thin coat for step 1. I basically prime the cup with epoxy. Then I come back in and pour my second coat. I do use a torch to pop any bubbles. So I am going to do this first coat. I just want it on here enough to where my fingers slide, everything's wet. I do have a big batch of epoxy because we have a bunch of other cups next to us on the turner that I'm going to go ahead and coat after we record this. So I am just making sure my entire cup is coated in epoxy. Two-step process here. Priming my cup, giving it something to stick to for when I pour the next coat on. I don't really always measure out my epoxy as far as how much I'm going to use on each coat. Some people go by however many ounces the cup is. So let's say it's a 10-ounce cup, you would use, or a 20-ounce cup, you would use 10 milliliters of epoxy when you're coating it. I think that's a good rule of thumb, except for when you're coating glitter layers. I feel like glitter layers, I use double that because it soaks it in. Okay, so my first layer is on. I am going to just pop a few little bubbles. I don't know where my other torch is. This is my old one. But it'll work. I don't like this torch very much. It doesn't shut off like it's supposed to. Okay. And now I'm going to come in here and I am going to pour in very thin lines here. And you'll notice my epoxy isn't like dripping off the backside. And that's because I gave it something to stick to. So it is sticking to this base layer we gave it. Now if I pour a bunch, of course it'll drip off, but really it's just sticking and flowing, sticking and flowing. And I go, ooh, didn't mean to pour that much. Now it's going to drip some because I poured way too much on my hands that time. And I don't do a lot of playing with it typically. I let it turn. Epoxy is self-leveling, so it will level itself. If I see some areas where I think it looks a little high maybe, but this is fresh epoxy, it should turn itself pretty well. And I typically will let it out, you know, I might pop the bubbles in this first coat, and then I always come back at 10 minutes or 10 to 15 minutes or so, and I will pop them bubbles again, because as it turns, bubbles are working their way to the surface. And so I will hit this thing with flame at least twice. Well, normally 3 times. Once after the first coat, then right about now I'll do it, and then again for the last coat. I'm going to grab the torch that I like though. And I always check on cups at 10 to 15 minutes because you'll see by that point if by chance there is something going on where you've missed a spot with epoxy, and maybe there's something on your cup, it's not letting it, you know, smooth out. Maybe there's, you know, some kind of something that got on there. Maybe there's a hair or a fiber or anything. By 10 minutes, you'll know whether or not you've missed any spots, if you need to come back and add anything, if you just need to, you know, rub it out a little bit more. So I'm going to let this Mr. B cup turn for about 10 to 15 minutes. I will come back and check on it, pop a few more bubbles, and then we will see how this comes off the turner together in the morning. Okay, so here's our cup off the turner. It turned out really nice. These little mason bee houses pop out pretty good against this wood grain and all the little bees. and their little names are on here. I think this fella is really going to like his tumbler. This is definitely a unique request, not something you would get often, but sometimes you have to think out of the box when they ask you to do things. All she told me was he loves bees, we want to put a lot of bees on it, and he's really into these mason bee houses, but she didn't want any kind of glitter or anything sparkly, so wood grain was a good choice for a male cup, and we were able to use that peekaboo effect to bring in some of those little mason bee houses that he really liked. So I'd love to see the projects that you do. If you are not a member of our Facebook group, the link is below, so jump over there and join us. If you want to check out any of our supplies that we use, our epoxies, our turners, our papers, all that good stuff, there's also a link below for that. And then if you want to see what we have online in our store, we do sell lots of our designs and our decals, SVG files, and some glitter. So the link to our store is below as well. So jump over there, check us out, and until next time, I will see you next Monday.